So I have to declare I'm kind of more on the homeowner side. I'm not really. I'm a bit biased, you know. So I
Well,
just
we all want to get to the truth of it.
Yeah,
I mean, whatever,
yeah.
You know, whatever it is.
The enhanced scheme. Who pays the engineer then when in the enhanced scheme?
Okay, so the homeowner engages the engineer, but ultimately it's paid as part of the grant.
Right. I'm just wondering, you know, if the engineer is working for the homeowner.
Yeah.
But you know,
the homeowner pays the engineer, and the engineer gets the money back as part of the whole grant for the works.
right.
Yeah. Or if the works don't go ahead, you just get paid. There's an amount there. I think it's 10 grand. You can look it up.
Right. Okay. I'm just wondering because you know, there's some people are out there thinking that their engineer is going to have to, you know, impose a solution that's decided by the housing agency, and even one of your engineers said that he felt that no engineer would be able to sign off on something, a remediation of that that's decided by the housing agency.
In the first scheme, you know, there are a number of options there. You know, going from full demolition to partial remediation. So the engineer can propose any of those. Now, in a scenario where, you know, the engineer may feel that, okay, if we go for option 2, that may not be enough. There could be a roadblock somewhere that could appear in a couple of years' time and deteriorate. Then the engineer will probably go for option 1, and then maybe, you know, so that report then will be looked at back in the council. So really, the council then decides that there's a bit of toing and froing.
But that's the 90-10 scheme, right?
Yeah.
So in the new scheme, is the, you know, will the engineer?
The new scheme is an assessment, building condition assessment report, BCA.
Yeah.
So that can be an engineer, or it could be a surveyor or an architect. So that'll be open to a broader pool. So there'll be a threshold for getting into the scheme.
Somebody from Engineers Island, or an engineer with Engineers Island, said that no engineer would be able to stand over a remediation option that they didn't really have a role in deciding upon it. The housing agency said the option 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, that the housing agency decides, and that he felt engineers wouldn't be able to stand over that because it was.
But the first part of it is that you get into the scheme, okay?
Yeah.
The BCA. The second part of it is if it decides to go for remediation, that can be a separate engineer that will be brought in to design the remediation. The first thing is just an assessment, not the actual remediation.
Okay, but when the remediation is decided upon, will an Engineers Island engineer be able to stand over that if he didn't have a role?
But they will be designing the remediation.
How do you mean?
So they will look at the property and decide how it will be remediated. So while the council may say it's option 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, it's up to the engineer to design how that will go, that will happen.
But is the engineer has to do what the housing agency says in terms of remediation, or can the engineer decide, I want this option, I want that option? Is the engineer making the decision, or is the housing agency making the decision on the remediation, which remediation option?
In that scheme, I suppose ultimately it'll be based on the BCA, the building condition assessment. That's what drives it.
Yeah, but that's only the initial getting on the scheme, right? But then after that, the housing engineer.
But that should tell you how bad the property is. It should tell you how big the cracks are or whatever.
So you don't think that so you're confident that Engineers Island engineer will be able to stand over any option that's determined by the housing agency?
The engineer only has to stand over the work they design and implement.
You mentioned that the engineer, for example, if it's an outer reef replacement, the engineer will only stand over the outer reef replacement.
That's all they can stand over, because they may not have looked at the other bit, or may not remediated the other bit. But so how can they be responsible for it?
Okay, so I saw a house the other day where the owners had done an outer leaf replacement with blocks from, and 4 years later they started getting cracks on the inside, but they also started getting cracks on the exterior. That would leave, if they were on this new scheme, that would leave the engineer in a tricky situation, would it?
It depends what the engineer's role in it is. If you're saying the outer leaf is replaced, okay?
Yeah.
And cracked later on. So the next thing is, why did it crack again?
Yeah, well,
Is it deleterious material, or is it subsidence, or some movement between the inner walls and the outer leaf?
yeah.
You know, so. But if it was an engineer that put in that remediated the outer leaf, you know, they would be responsible for that.
Wouldn't an engineer feel like they were doing a disservice to the customer if they only stood over the outer leaf and the rest of the house was not their responsibility? Wouldn't it be a bit disingenuous to say?
That's the feedback that came from the first scheme. That engineers were uncomfortable doing that, you know, because there's an unknown bit. They don't know what's in that wall there,
Right.
because it hasn't been tested.
Do you feel that the new scheme is answering those questions that came up for engineers from the 9010 scheme?
Well, it gives a second chance of remediation, which is what the engineers were looking for. At least if they did an option 2 to 5, and it proved unsatisfactory, at least there was another option to go back and say, right, that didn't work. And realistically, in the second bite of the cherry, you go for option 1 and demolish and replace the whole property. That's the only thing you can do, really.
Yeah. You said you felt frustrated that you had to act within the kind of criteria kind of imposed upon you guys.
Well, the standard is the standard, and that's all you can act against. If you deviate outside that, you're not going to be covered by insurance or anything else. Yeah.
Do you feel you kind of have one hand tied behind your back in a way?
Well, that's the standard that was given. Now it's under review, so a load of feedback has been given, and we heard from the debate here today. Sometime, whenever the research is done on the mechanism of deterioration, that will feed into the standard. So the standard will evolve. As somebody said there earlier, the science hasn't caught up with the scheme. The scheme is ahead of it, if you want to use that phrase. So the standard will catch up. But yeah, the engineers, we were handed IS 465. Okay, we have now provided feedback into it based on reality and what we've seen on the ground, and I think that's been taken into account to some degree.
Could you give an example of one of the things that you found particularly frustrating?
Well, not knowing, for example, like test results coming back that are inconclusive, saying, well, it's not mica, it's something else. Maybe it's pyrite, maybe it's not, I don't know. But, once it's not mica or pyrite, it falls out of the standard, black and white. There's no grey room in it, and that's the issue.
Okay.
It doesn't give that wriggle room.
Test suites A, B, and C. Where did those come from? Are those something the housing agency made up? Is test A, is that something that the whole world knows that's a standard called test A, or is that something?
I don't know the genesis of where it came from in the beginning, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
But test A doesn't only test for mica, right? Is that right?
I don't know. Go on.
Okay. An engineer knows that some quarries are knowingly shipping blocks with deleterious materials. I mean, one wouldn't be confident building a house today. I have an email into the department asking if they can guarantee that all blocks in the country are free from deleterious materials. And I think the word on the street is that can't be guaranteed. How can an engineer stand over any remediation option if de facto blocks are still on the market?
They'll have to go back and get certifications from the suppliers of the blocks and traceable back to the source. The same way, you can trace a lump of meat at the supermarket as to what cow came from. So it's not beyond our capabilities to go back and say, well, where did that block come from? And maybe that hasn't been done as diligently as it should have been.
But that's costing homeowners €7,000 to send to Petrolabs in the UK, and we didn't even have a testing facility here. So that's not even possible, is it, to test blocks? On a continual basis at the moment.
No, well, testing them is one thing, but you're saying if I'm building a house and I buy blocks, okay, then I should be able to go back to the manufacturer, the supplier, the manufacturer, and get the chain of command all the way back. They will show me the certifications. And if there's a problem with them, then at least you have an audit trail, and you can sue them or do whatever.
But would an engineer feel confident that audit trail is currently in place in Ireland?
Well, they can check out the documentation. I mean, it's all under the building control regulations of a signed certifier, which isn't a certifier. They have to check the documentation all the way back for every component.
So could I actually go into a building provider and buy a couple of blocks and then ask for that paperwork trail and see what but I mean, at the end of the day, at the end of the line, somebody has to have done a physical test or something, or is it?
Well,
or is it just?
But
is it the self-certification thing still there?
No, but the tests are done in a sample like anything else. can't test every block.
building materials manufacturers were self-certifying, right? And that's still the case. They're still self-certifying.
I don't know if they're still self-certifying, but I don't know about that.
But would you feel confident signing off on a house knowing that deleterious materials are still being sold?
Knowing that they're being sold or knowing that they're in the property, that's a very different thing. You know, you do the due diligence and check where everything's coming from. The same in anything else.
But I mean, how do
you wouldn't put a rogue tablet into your mouth?
But I mean, if you're looking at a block,
certification.
you can't tell, you know.
But you can check where it came from, where it's made, and go right back to the source. You can follow that chain of command. Now you may draw a blank, in which case, well, I'm not using that block.
But do you think that the at the end of the line that you would be confident that the proper tests would be done today? You'd be happy with that?
If somebody's giving you certification that the testing will be done, what else can you do?
Okay.
I mean, when you put a tablet in your mouth for a headache, there's a little note in the box that says this has been tested all the way through now. So you have a choice. Do you believe that or not?
Well, I think those tests are probably there, but I feel reluctant to believe that the tests are there for concrete materials being manufactured in Ireland today. That's just my view.
So supposing you chase back to a block manufacturer, right?
Yeah.
Call them Joe or Mick, right?
Yeah.
So you got mixed concrete blocks.
Yeah.
And you give us a certification here. This is certified. Was it IS 1260 or whatever? It is, okay. And it has a certificate, NSCI or BSI or whatever on it, or EN. So to give you that, so now what? They've given you that cert, you know.
But I didn't know that cert wasn't just printed out with no test at all.
Well then, so now where are you? What do you want them to do? What else? What extra can they provide? You are now at the situation where you bought your box of paracetamol. There's that little leaflet in it. You're in exactly the same situation with this concrete block as that paracetamol. So what is causing this dichotomy?
But if I follow that chain all the way back, and you know, there's a quarry giving me a certificate, can I then ask them where they got that tested? They would be able to say, I got it tested.
You can see it on the bottle.
How often does that happen, do you think?
I don't know, but you can see it on a bottle of mineral water.
Okay.
Did you ever see a bottle of mineral water that just contains this, and this, and when it was tested?
Yeah.
So surely, I mean, it's not beyond. I'm not saying it's there. I don't know if it is or not.
Okay.
I get that. What I'm saying is, that's the way it should be.
One last question, because I know you want to get a break. Are you aware of any other engineering solutions in Ireland that are on a county by county basis?
No.
What's the rationale, do you think, for having each county have to fight to get on the scheme?
That's because the scheme is local authority driven.
You don't think it's housing department driven?
Which ultimately looks after the local authorities.
Right. So county by county.
For example, when our engineers discovered that, say, certain areas like Clare or Limerick or wherever, where there was deleterious material cropping up, okay. So ultimately, to get into the scheme, is the local authorities there apply to the department. That's my understanding.
Right. But I mean,
that's how it looks like. That's how it looks like county to county.
But I mean, it seems quite obvious to me that you could have a building here, a house here, 50 metres away there's another building, house, and there's a county border between the two of them.
Oh,
and blocks from Donegal could be going to Cork and vice versa.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. For example, you've Donegal and Mayo, but Sligo in between is in the scheme. Do you know what I mean?
So it's a pointless thing to have a county by county.
I think the county by county is a matter of administration.
Right.
That's really what it's about. I don't know. You'd have to delve into it. It could be budget driven. I don't know what. Yeah.
Damien, can I just thank you very much for your time? I appreciate it. I really do. Thank you very much. Cheers. Okay. Thank you.